So good morning students. All of you have joined. Hello,
Good
happy
morning,
morning.
ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, I am not hearing your voices. Why early morning fatigue? Hmm? Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah. Shall we start? Or will wait? Still people are joining. Hmm? Another just 1 minute we will wait. Yeah. So last class I told you about the complaints of the lung. Yes or no? Hmm? It also comes under the competency 6.2, that is mechanics of breathing only. Okay. So these are my last time slides, but just I want to revise very fast because as I told you this is somewhat difficult topic to understand by once reading. Okay, you need repeated reading for it. So just now I will just go back a quick revision of the slides which I have told you in the last class. That is, I told you that what is alveolar surface tension. So I told you that the lungs has a capacity to recoil back, isn't it? It has a capacity to recoil back opposite to the chest wall, and chest wall has an opposite capacity of expanding. Okay, so these are the inherent capacity of the lungs and chest wall, and usually they balanced. Okay, so tendency of the lung to recoil back always balances with the tendency of chest to recoil in opposite direction. They must be balanced, otherwise what happens, either the lung will collapse or the chest wall will become more expanded and the chest becomes barrel shaped. Hence for normal physiology it has to be balanced. Okay, then the tendency of the lungs to recoil is governed by two forces I told you. So recoil of elastic tissues of the lung. So lung is made up of elastic tissues. So that is responsible for the recoiling back of the lung tissue and the surface tension with the alveoli. Okay, surface tension is a force which causes the collapse, inward force. Okay, collapse of the alveoli. So it helps in collapsing the recoiling back of the alveoli, but it has to be reduced at the end of expiration when already the alveolar diameter of the alveoli will be very small to prevent the total collapse of the alveoli. Okay, so but the important recoiling forces are elastic tissues of the lung and the surface tension which is present in the alveoli because of the presence of thin layer of fluid in the inner surface of alveoli. Okay, so what is surface tension? It is due to the intermolecular attraction between the surface molecule. It tries to reduce the surface area and collapse the lung. So it has a inward it is an inward force, so it should be reduced especially during expiration. So it can be explained by the help of a Laplace's law. So Laplace's law said that assume alveoli as a spherical structure. So this law holds good to any hollow-spherical structure. Then distending pressure is equal to 2 times the tension divided by radius of the alveoli. So P is the pressure, okay, which directed inwards. T is the surface tension and radius of the alveoli. Okay, so this is Laplace law. So in this diagram you can understand that when alveoli are in a smaller diameter, that means at the end of expiration diameter becomes less, but during inspiration the diameter of the alveoli will be big. So if you apply the formula, okay, Laplace's formula, if T is constant, okay, for a same constant tension, okay, then P1 will be greater than P2, isn't it? So when alveoli become smaller in diameter, then the pressure will increase. So this may lead to the collapse of the lung if the tension is not reduced. So the substance surfactant, which I am telling you, what the function of the surfactant is, it reduces the T and keeps the P constant. Okay, so it reduces the T and P will not be so much high that alveoli will collapse. Okay, that's the function of, this is the better understanding of your Laplace's law and how the surfactant will prevent the collapse of the alveoli. Okay, so here in this diagram you can make out. So this is without diagram, this is without surfactant, this is with surfactant. So here what happened, alveoli 1 and 2 have equal surface tension, one has higher pressure, okay, due to the smaller radius, and one more likely to collapse, isn't it? This is what I told you. Then with surfactant, what it does, because of the presence of these surfactant molecules, okay, they are arranged closely in a, if the alveoli has become smaller in diameter, and this caused the reduction in our surface tension. So have less surface tension, more surfactant per area. So here the arrangement of surfactant molecule is more per area, and 1 and 2 have equal pressure. Now even though the diameter is less here, but the pressure is maintained constant because of the arrangement of these surfactant molecules. When the alveoli are expanded, these surfactant molecules are arranged apart. Okay, as you can see. So one will inflate at a faster rate than two until equal in size. So this is the mechanism by which the surfactant prevents the collapse of the lung. So very important function of our surfactant is to reduce the surface tension, that too at the end of expiration. Okay. Now I hope you understood the Laplace's application of Laplace's law in alveoli and the role of surfactant very well. Okay. So what is this surfactant? I told you this in the last class itself. It's a lipid protein mixture. So dipalmityl phosphatidyl choline is the important component with other lipids it has, and it is secreted by type 2 granular pneumocytes. Okay. So the function is, it prevents the pulmonary edema, it keeps the alveoli dry. Okay. These things I told you in the last class itself, and here you can make out, okay, with the surfactant, okay, the pressure is so less compared to without surfactant. Okay, here also you can make out alveoli with surfactant, alveoli without surfactant, they are collapsing. Okay, so now with this experiment they have proved the function of surfactant. So they have done this experiment in the cat. I told you this in the last class only. So this is the normal lung with the air-filled lung. This is the lung filled with the saline. Okay. So this measures both the lung tissue elasticity and the recoiling force because of the surface tension. So this measures only the tissue elasticity, because here the surface tension is 0 because the saline is added, so surface tension has become 0. So without if there is no surface tension, so you can make out the inhalation and expiration has no difference here. Okay, the curve has become almost the same. So by adding solution, there is no interface between air and alveolar fluid. Okay, so the forces, that is the P forces, recoiling forces because of surface tension has been removed here. Okay, so surface tension is not present, only elastic forces. So this A diagram shows only the elastic forces of the lungs. Okay, so here it is a normal lung with air. So here there is a fluid air interface is there, surface tension is there, and that leads to the normal functioning of our lungs. Okay, so this is inspiration, this is expiration. Here there is not much difference between inspiration and expiration. Okay, that means there is a very less compliance. Okay. So next is factors affecting surfactant. I told you this in the last class itself. So decreases in case of a long-term inhalation of 100% oxygen, occlusion of main bronchus, occlusion of pulmonary arteries, cigarette smoking and cutting both the way, and increases in many hormones like thyroid hormone, glucocorticoids, and I told you about this also, that is infant respiratory distress syndrome and hyaline membrane syndrome in the last class. This is because of the deficiency of surfactants in the newborn. So what happens in this? It is also called as acute disease of newborn and infant respiratory distress syndrome or respiratory distress syndrome. So here there is an absence or decreased surfactant, greater the surface tension, okay, and harder for the oxygen to get into the blood and lower pulmonary ventilation. Okay, and this is because of the hypoxia, the patient, the newborn will suffer from respiratory distress syndrome. Alveoli may collapse because of the absence of surfactant. The alveoli will collapse and there is no proper gaseous exchange. That is about your respiratory distress syndrome. Then I told you about the compliance of the lung. What is compliance? So this definition is very important. You must remember this. Change in lung volume per unit change in airway pressure, dV by dP, is the definition of compliance, and it is the distensibility of the lungs at the chest wall. It is expressed in liter per centimeter of water. Okay, if we measure compliance of lung along with the chest wall, that is lung inside the chest wall, the compliance is 0.13 liter per centimeter of water. If we measure compliance of lung alone, lung is removed from the chest, and if you measure, it will be almost the twice, because some force is required for the lungs for expansion of the chest wall also, isn't it? Hence, the compliance of the lung and chest wall together is less compared to the compliance of the lung alone. Okay, and what are the causes for compliance? It is because of the elastic forces of the lung tissue. So this constitute about 1/3 of the recoiling forces, isn't it? So elastic tissue of the lungs is the important cause for the compliance of the lung, and second is elastic forces of the fluid that lines the inside wall of the alveoli and other lung air passages, that is B forces, which I told you, they are very important for recoiling. Okay, and these are the arrangement of elastin fibers in the lung. As I told you, there is a special arrangement here like that of your socks, the stockings you will wear. So each fiber cannot be stretched, but whole socks can be stretched. Like that, in lungs also, the whole lung tissue can be expanded. Individual fibers cannot be expanded. That is called as, that is the important special arrangement of the fibers which occurs in our lungs. Okay, and the presence of surfactant. Okay, these two are the very important forces for the compliance of the lung. Okay, and this is the compliance curve. Okay, if you plot pleural pressure on the x-axis and lung volume on the y-axis, then we'll get the inspiration curve and the expiration curve. Okay, you can make out, if the lung would have been a perfectly elastic structure, then we would have got this straight line only. Okay, but we have not got the perfect straight line. Okay, that means the relation is not exactly linear. Okay, so it has lagging behind somewhat. Okay, and we can make out the volume of the lung is more in during expiration compared to the inspiration for the same pressure, isn't it? You can make out, that means there is a lagging behind here. Okay, this type of loop is called as hysteresis loop by the mathematicians. Okay, so this is called as hysteresis loop. Okay, so here this is the inspiration up to 500 ml, that is up to the tidal volume, and this is the way of expiration. Okay, so two different phases, that is inspiratory compliance curve will get and expiratory compliance curve. It shows the capacity of the lung to adapt to small changes of transpulmonary pressure. Compliance is seen at low volumes because so at the low volumes and at the end of the tidal volume the compliance is more because of difficulty with initial lung inflation, and at high volume because of the limit of the chest wall for expansion. Okay, next is, so if the compliance is more or stretchability is more, okay, the graph will shift to the left. Okay, that in case of a emphysema. Okay, and if the stretchability is less or compliance is less, like in case of fibrosis of the lung, the graph will shift to the right. Okay, so here the stretchability is less, here the stretchability is more. This much you remember. Okay, now coming on to the compliance of the thorax and lung together. Okay, so if we measure the compliance of the lung and the thorax together, this is the graph we get for compliance of the lung and thorax together, and this is for the thorax and this is for the lungs. B is for the lungs, isn't it? So compliance of whole system is measured while expanding lung of totally relaxed or paralyzed person. So this is recorded only during static condition. Okay, some amount of amount of air person is allowed to inhale, then hold the breath, then you record the pressure. Like that you have plot, you can plot this. So compliance of the lung plus thorax is half of the lung alone. This I told you already. When lungs are expanded to high volume or compressed to low volumes, limitation of chest wall increases. Okay. Next. So this is one more recording which shows you clearly. So this is the arrangement of recording. The person is allowed to inhale from the spirometer. This is the valve, and here there is an instrument to measure the pressure is adjusted just near the mouthpiece. So person is allowed to inhale the amount of air. Okay, then the valve is closed. Okay, then volume you know already, pressure you will record. Like that you go on recording the for different volumes the different pressure. Okay, like that you are plotting here. So at the zero pressure, okay, so this is the zero pressure. Okay, what is the volume? The volume you will get at the zero pressure. This is called as relaxing volume. Okay, relaxing pressure and volume. Hence this curve is called as relaxing pressure and volume curve. So this is usually at FRC level, functional residual capacity. Okay, at this level, that is at the end of normal expiration. Okay, this is the level you will get the zero pressure. This is called as the relaxing pressure, and this volume is called as the relaxing volume. Okay, beyond it, when the person continues to inhale, beyond this level, if person continues to inhale, the pressure decreases up to up to 30 mm. Okay, up to 30 centimeter of water. It goes on increasing. Then in the opposite, if the person exhales, then the pressure decreases to 30. Okay, so this is called as the relaxation pressure volume curve. Okay. Next is compliance of the lung alone. Factors affecting only the lung compliance. Okay, so here the lung volume, individual with only one lung will have a less compliance. Okay, phases of respiratory cycle. During deflation, compliance will be more. During inflation, compliance will be less because the already expanded alveoli it is difficult to expand. Okay, so during deflation compliance will be more and during inflation compliance will be less. And effect of gravity at the apex of the lungs, because of the effect of gravity compliance will be less. Okay, and in surface tension, if surface tension is more compliance is less. Okay, so this is the factors which affect compliance of the lung alone. And specific compliance, it is the measure of compliance per functional residual capacity. So, for example, in an individual whom one lung is removed, okay, then this is the better index in that case. Otherwise, even though there is a normal stretchability, you may get the less compliance. So, if you measure compliance, because FRC also will be proportionately reduced in those patients. So, compliance per FRC if you measured, that will give you the correct idea. And even in case of a children, okay, in case of a children, the lung size of the lung is very, very small. If you just measure the compliance, it may be less and you feel it is less stretchability. But if you measure compliance plus FRC, then you will get the normal stretchability. Okay. Then the compliance of the lung alone, if you measure by this setup, you will get this type of graph. So this I already told you the compliance graph. This is the inspiration, this is the expiration. And how you measure the work done during inspiration and expiration. So you can draw one line here, okay, straight line here, and the area from this curve, okay, is the work done during inspiration, and area which is under this curve is the work done during expiration. Like that you can calculate. Now, clinical significance, higher compliance. Okay, higher compliance you'll get in case of old age, emphysema, okay, and static compliance, okay, that is loss of elastic fibers and dynamic compliance. Here the low compliance you will get in case of apex of lung, obscene surfactant, acute respiratory distress syndrome, pulmonary fibrosis and interstitial lung diseases. Okay. To summarize, I told you last class also I showed you this change in lung volume for each lung, each unit change in transpulmonary pressure. Okay, two different curves according to different phases you show. Okay, and compliance of the lung occur due to the elastic forces, that is tissue elastic forces and fluid air surface tension elastic forces. Okay, these are the important things to be remembered. And surfactant has a protein lipid mixture, okay, and it reduces the surface tension. Now coming on to the work done during breathing. So elastic resistance 65%, okay, and non-elastic resistance 35%. That is viscous resistance constitute about 7% and airway resistance about 28%. So when we want to inhale, we have to overcome all these resistances, that is elastic resistances and non-elastic resistances. So flow of air is equal to P by R, where P is the pressure difference between the two ends of the tube and R is the resistance to the airflow. Hence, with this formula, airway resistance is equal to atmospheric pressure minus alveolar pressure divided by airflow. Okay, with this you can calculate the airway resistance. That is the difference between atmospheric pressure minus alveolar pressure divided by airflow. Normal is 1.5 to 2 centimeter of water per liter per second. So every 2 centimeter decrease in the pressure, 1 liter of water enters into our lung per second. But in smokers, we need much more pressure, okay, 500 centimeter of water for same amount of air to inhale, that is 1 liter of air to inhale. Okay. Now, increased work of breathing occurs when there is a decreased pulmonary compliance. Compliance is stretchability. So if stretchability is decreased, more work done has to be done by our lungs, isn't it? And increase airway resistance. When there is an obstruction to the airway, then the work of breathing will increase. When there is a decreased elastic recoil, okay, because of the loss of elastic tissue or anything, decreased recoiling property of our lung, okay, then work done for breathing will be more. And need for increased ventilation. When we need more ventilation, work done for breathing will be increased. Okay, so these are the conditions where the work done for breathing will be increased. Okay, now coming on to the factors affecting airflow resistance. Airflow resistance is inversely proportional to the total cross-sectional area. Okay, so trachea has 2.5 square centimeter. Okay, and alveoli has enormous surface area, you know. So hence the trachea constitute about 80% of the airway resistance, as the total cross-sectional area is less. But even though the diameter of trachea is more compared to the main bronchus or the alveoli, because there is a surface area is more in the alveoli. Okay, you might have know this formula, that is Poiseuille-Higgins formula, where R is equal to 8 NL by pi R to the power of 4, where this is theta. Theta is the viscosity and L is the length of the tube and R is the radius of the tube. Okay, I think you have learned this in your early classes. This is called as Poiseuille-Higgins formula. So what it indicates, resistance increases whenever there is a viscosity of air increases or the length increases, isn't it? And resistance increases when radius decreases, isn't it? Radius is inversely proportional to resistance. So that means when the resistance decreases to the half, okay, so how much time the radius decreases to half, okay, how much time the resistance will increase? It is around 16 times, isn't it? Okay, so this indicates the relation between the resistance and radius and viscosity. Okay, what is the physiological significance of this formula in our lungs? Duration of expiration, you know already, is more compared to the duration of inspiration. Why? Why means during expiration the airway diameter is less. Okay, so diameter of the alveoli will be less. Okay, hence duration of expiration is more compared to the inspiration, and expiration is a passive process and airway resistance is high during expiration, as during expiration diameter of airway decreases, hence the duration of expiration is more. And in case of a bronchial asthma, even again there is an obstruction for expiration. Okay, constriction of airway occurs. Okay, diameter decreases, hence the resistance increases. Okay, hence in bronchial asthma also same law will be applicable. Okay, R will decrease and this resistance will increase in case of bronchial asthma patients. Okay, now coming on to the another factors like type of flow also affect airflow resistance. So turbulent flow, air, in case of a turbulent flow, airway resistance is more compared to the streamline flow. Okay, so whenever there is a turbulent flow, airway resistance is more. So there is one more formula here. Type of airflow depends on Reynolds number. Reynolds number is equal to VdP by N, where V is the velocity, D is the diameter, P is the density of air and theta is the viscosity. So it also indicates that Reynolds number increases when there is an increase in velocity of air, okay, when there is an increase in diameter of the airway, and when the density of the air increases, Reynolds number is increase. So when Reynolds number is increased, the turbulent flow occurs. Okay. So whenever there is a velocity of air increases, diameter of the airway decreases, and density of air increases, turbulent flow occurs. But viscosity has a inverse relation. When viscosity increases, Reynolds number decreases, and we will get the streamline flow. Reynolds number increases when there is a turbulent flow. Reynolds number is decreased when there is a streamline flow. So if Reynolds number is more than 200 to 400, turbulent flow occurs. This you must know. If it is more than 2000, then almost in every part of the lung, turbulent flow occurs. Okay. So this is the diagram to show you the turbulent flow, and this is the laminar flow. So whenever Reynolds number increases, the flow becomes turbulent. Okay. Now the airway resistance, this graph is not clear, let it be. Then next, coming on to the one more important aspect of mechanics of breathing, that is alveolar ventilation. Okay, so here the alveolar ventilation, or it is also called as VA, it is the amount of air ventilating the alveoli per minute. Okay, that is amount of air ventilating the alveoli per minute. So alveolar ventilation is equal to tidal volume minus dead space into respiratory rate. Okay, so alveolar ventilation, normal tidal volume is 500 and normal dead space is 150 ml and normal respiratory rate is 12. So if you calculate this, normally your alveolar ventilation will become 4.2 liters per minute. Okay, so in rapid shallow breathing, alveolar ventilation decreases even pulmonary ventilation is normal, even though pulmonary ventilation is normal. In slow and deep respiration, alveolar ventilation and pulmonary ventilation are, it is V, okay, and pulmonary ventilation are normal. Okay, so in slow and deep respiration, both alveolar ventilation and pulmonary ventilation are normal. Okay, so normal alveolar ventilation is around 4.2 liters per minute. Okay, now coming on to the dead space. What is this? Dead space. So this is nothing but amount of air in the respiratory tract which does not take part in exchange of gases. This is the amount of air in the respiratory tract, but it does not take part in exchange of gases. So there are two types of dead spaces, anatomical dead space and physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space is the air which is present from nose to the terminal bronchioles. So they are not at all take part in the exchange. Okay, so that is the air present in the conducting zone of our respiratory tract. Normal value is 150 ml. And physiological dead space. Physiological dead space is, it is the total dead space which is present in our lung. It is nothing but the air which is present in the alveoli but not taking part in the gaseous exchange. So in healthy lungs, in healthy condition, anatomical dead space is equal to physiological dead space. Okay, so there should not be any physiological dead space in a healthy individual. Okay, in healthy subject, anatomical dead space is equal to physiological dead space. Okay, but this variation in dead space occurs in physiological variations are, as age increases, dead space in anatomical dead space is increased because of the loss of elasticity and dilatation, increased airways, okay, diameter of the airway, and the sex. Okay, in case of a male, the dead space is more compared to the females. Okay, and in pathological conditions like emphysema, bronchiectasis, pulmonary embolism, there is no pulmonary circulation, hence proper exchange does not occur, hence the physiological. In these cases also, emphysema, bronchiectasis, there is defect in ventilation and perfusion ratios, hence the dead space increases in those conditions. Okay, so this is the diagram showing the dead space. So in healthy individual, anatomical dead space represents the entire dead space. But in people with lung diseases, some alveoli do not get blood supply. Okay, such alveoli do not participate in the gas exchange. They constitute alveolar dead space. They have shown here. Okay, some alveoli are diseased. Okay, they are not getting the, here there is no exchange occur because of the loss of blood supply. Okay, hence these constitute physiological dead space. So diagram also is showing no gas exchange, even though there is a air, oxygen is there, but if there is no pulmonary blood flow, no exchange occurs. Okay, this constitute your physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space is which is present in the conducting zone, that is normally present in all individual, that is around 150 ml. Okay, this is called as physiological or functional dead space. Okay. How you measure this dead space? Measurement of anatomical dead space, there are two methods, that is the direct method and indirect single breath oxygen technique. In direct method, dead space is equal to expired air volume into carbon dioxide percentage in alveolar air minus the carbon dioxide percentage in the expired air divided by carbon dioxide percentage in the alveolar air. By using this formula, you can directly measure the dead space. Indirectly, you can measure single breath oxygen technique, measurement of physiological dead space. So here the expired air volume into partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveolar air minus the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the expired air divided by partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveolar air. With this formula, you can calculate the dead space. Okay, so this is the graph showing the dead space. Okay, so the here in the graph the area A is equal to area B and this shows the dead space. This is recorded by nitrogen meter. So here what happens, in a nitrogen meter, the person is asked to take 100% oxygen. Okay, then allowed to expire. So initially the person will expire 100% oxygen. That time the nitrogen expired will be 0 only, isn't it? Okay, then up to certain level till the person will expire 100% oxygen, it remains 0, then it increases, isn't it? Then the nitrogen level will increase. Okay, then there is an sharp increase in the nitrogen concentration, then it comes back to the plateau level. So this is the part, okay, during which the dead space will be expired. Okay, by measuring this part you can measure the dead space. So initially expired nitrogen concentrate is plotted against time as seen in the top graph, and to calculate the anatomical dead space, expired nitrogen is plotted against the volume. The upstroke of the curve is equally divided in half. So this graph is equally divided by a line into half. Okay, to give area A and B, the anatomical dead space equal to the volume 0 up to and including area B. Okay, so from here to here, this constitute the dead space. So one more diagram they have shown here. Okay, same graph, that is the nitrogen concentration and the exhaled volume. Okay, here the nitrogen is 0. Okay, then it increases. So this is the part which occupies the dead space. Okay, then sharp increase and phase third. Okay. Now coming on to one more very important point, that is ventilation perfusion ratio, that is V by P ratio. It is the ratio of alveolar ventilation to pulmonary blood flow, that is alveolar ventilation divided by pulmonary blood flow. As you know, normal alveolar ventilation is 4.2 liter. So if you take 4 liter here per minute divided by normal pulmonary blood flow is 5 liters per minute, then the normal ratio will become 0.8. So normal V by P ratio is 0.8, that is normal ventilation perfusion ratio. Factors affecting ventilation perfusion ratio. Physiological or effect of gravity. In a standing position, because of the gravity in apex, the V by P ratio increases, that is 3.4, and in the base of the lungs it is less, that is 0.63. I will show you this why. Then pathological conditions are uneven alveolar ventilation, like in case of bronchial asthma, emphysema, pneumothorax, pulmonary fibrosis, congestive cardiac failure. These are all the causes, they causes uneven alveolar ventilation. Okay, and non-uniform pulmonary blood flow. It occurs in congenital heart diseases like Fallot's tetralogy, emphysema and pulmonary embolism. These are the causes which causes non-uniform pulmonary blood flow. So this ratio being normal, that is 0.8, is not important. It should be 0.8 in every part of the lung, then only the lungs are functioning normally. Okay, so with this diagram you can make out. So upper zone alveolar ventilation is 1.92 liter, in the middle zone 4 liters per minute, and in the lower zone 6.5. So alveolar ventilation increases from upper apex of the lung to the base. Likewise, even the blood flow is increases apex of the lung, it is 0.56, here it is 5 liters per minute, 10.3 in the base. So blood flow also increases from apex of the lung to the base, but blood flow is more increased compared to the alveolar ventilation. Hence, if you calculate V by P ratio, in the apex it is 3.4, in the middle it is 0.8, and in the lower zone it is 0.63. Okay, so this is the V by P ratio in our lungs. Now, uniformity of the V by P ratio is very important. How you measure whether V by P ratio is uniform in our lungs or not? Measure physiological and anatomical dead space. If physiological dead space is more than anatomical dead space, then there is ununiformity. V by P ratio is not uniform. There must be alveoli with high V by P ratio. If physiological dead space is more than, and normally it should be equal. But if physiological dead space is more than anatomical dead space, then there must be some alveoli which are having high V by P ratio or altered pulmonary ventilation and perfusion. And you can understand by these two figures very nice the examples, that is, and O2 content of the expired air also indicate whether V by P ratio is uniform or not, because O2 content should be initially more, then it should go on decreasing. If there is a O2 content is more at the end of expiration also, it indicates V by P ratio is not uniform. Now, let us understand this example A and example B. Example A, what happens in right lung, because of some obstruction, there is no alveolar ventilation. Okay, alveolar ventilation is 0 in the right lung, but in the left lung it is 4 liters per minute. Okay, but blood flow, it is normal, that is 5 liters per minute in the right lung, but blood flow is absent because of some reason in the left lung. Okay, then if you measure V by P ratio, okay, of the right lung it is 0, and if the left lung it is infinity. Anything divided by 0 is, I think, infinity. Okay, but if you measure total V by P ratio of both the lung, it is 4 by 5.8. Even though total V by P ratio is normal here, but the patient will die because of the loss of oxygenation. Okay, here oxygen is there is no blood flow. Here no oxygen, blood flow is there. Here blood flow, here oxygen is there, but no blood flow. So this is not going to help. Okay, both the lungs should get proper oxygenation and proper blood flow. Then only the normal V by P ratio will be present. Normal exchange of gases will occur. In example B, here the alveolar ventilation is 3.5 liters per minute, but left lung is getting less, that is 0.5 liters per minute. But pulmonary blood flow is normal in both the sides, that is 2.5 liters per minute and 2.5 liters per minute. Then if you calculate V by P ratio, it is 1.4, that is more than normal in the right lung and it is less than normal in the left lung. But total if you calculate, it will be normal, that is 0.8. This indicates that V by P ratio normal is not important, it should be uniform in both the lungs. Okay, that is important. Okay. Next, so this is one more diagram to show the V by P ratio. These are the apex of the lung and these are the base of the lung. Okay. Next, coming on to one more topic, that is diffusion capacity of the lung. So oxygen and carbon dioxide has to diffuse from pulmonary alveoli to the pulmonary capillaries, and they have to pass through these layers, these 10 layers. I told you in my beginning class this, okay, these 10 layers. So but its thickness is very less, that is 0.5 micron. So it has to cross surfactant, alveolar epithelial, basement membrane of alveoli, interstitial fluid, basement membrane of capillary endothelium, capillary endothelial cells, plasma, red cell membrane, intra erythrocyte fluid and then finally it goes to the hemoglobin. Okay, so with this now you can understand the diffusion capacity of the lungs. So it is the amount of a gas that crosses the alveolar membrane or respiratory membrane per minute per mm of Hg difference in partial pressure of gas on the two sides of the membrane. Normal diffusion capacity of oxygen is around 20 to 30 ml per minute per mm of Hg on rest. Diffusion capacity is directly proportional to the surface area of alveolar capillary, okay, and capillary membrane, okay, divided by thickness of alveolar capillary membrane. So the diffusion capacity is given by a formula: surface area of alveolar capillary membrane divided by thickness of alveolar capillary membrane. That means whenever surface area of alveolar capillary membrane increases, diffusion capacity increases, and if thickness increases, diffusion capacity decreases. If thickness decreases, diffusion capacity increases. So thickness has inverse relationship with the diffusion capacity. In healthy subject, rapid diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs within 0.3 seconds, and normally the thickness is 0.5 micron as I showed you. Okay. Then diffusion capacity decreases when there is a block in pulmonary capillary or block in airways, like in and even in the pulmonary edema. And diffusion capacity increases 3 times during exercise, because during exercise surface area will increase, maximum alveoli will expand. Okay, many airways will open during exercise, hence the diffusion capacity will increase during exercise. Okay, and this is that reduced surface area, like decreases the diffusion capacity. And interstitial alteration of the membrane integrity, decreased diffusion capacity, like pulmonary fibrosis, asbestosis and sarcoidosis, there is a decrease in diffusion capacity occurs. Okay, and diffusion capacity is equal to, there is one more formula, solubility of the gas divided by root of molecular weight of the gas. Okay, so diffusion capacity of, so solubility of the gas increases, diffusion capacity increases, and if the molecular weight increases, diffusion capacity will decrease. Okay, so diffusion capacity of carbon dioxide is 20 times that of the oxygen. Okay, if you calculate by this formula, you will get that diffusion capacity of carbon dioxide is 20 times more. Measurement of diffusion capacity. So diffusion capacity of oxygen is equal to oxygen consumption per minute divided by mean alveolar PO2 minus mean pulmonary capillary PO2. With this formula you can calculate the diffusion capacity of oxygen. But it's very difficult to calculate mean pulmonary capillary PO2. Okay, so difficult to measure the mean pulmonary PO2. Hence, diffusion capacity of oxygen is measured indirectly by measuring the diffusion capacity of carbon monoxide. As carbon monoxide has 200 times more affinity of hemoglobin and mean pulmonary capillary PCO is 0. Okay, because most of the carbon dioxide combines with the hemoglobin. Hence, by applying same formula, you can easily calculate the diffusion capacity of carbon monoxide. With that, indirectly you can calculate the diffusion capacity of oxygen. Okay, so this finish your mechanics of breathing, that is 6.2 competency. But these are very important topics. Diffusion capacity, V by P ratio, okay, respiratory membrane, dead space, all those are very frequently asked main questions for you people. Okay, so please go through it, make your own notes. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. So there are some multiple choice questions I have prepared, but I think time is only 3 minutes, just we can go through. Okay, that is. So question 1, as alveolar size decreases, transmural pressure, what is your answer? Can anyone? As alveolar size decreases, transmural pressure decrease, increase, what is the answer? Any one of you? Yes? As alveolar size decreases, transmural pressure increase or decrease. So think about it. Which of the following increases during sternness breathing? Okay, sternness means strong, difficult breathing. Which one is increased? Compliance is increased, airway resistance is increased, tissue resistance is increased, or surface tension is increased. Pulmonary vascular resistance is greater in the lung during maximum inspiration rather than expiration. Is about 1/10 that of the systemic circulation. Will decrease in poorly ventilated areas. Is not affected by sympathetic nervous system. What is your answer? Anyone? Yes? No voice, nothing. Your mom. Pin drop silence. Why? Not understood anything? Yes, next is alveolar surfactant acts to increase. You remember this word increase. Alveolar surfactant acts to increase pulmonary surface tension, surface area, compliance or airway resistance. I hope this is very easy question. Anyone? Alveolar surfactant will increase what?
Surface tension.
No. Alveolar function of surfactant is to decrease surface tension. Yes or no? The very important function of surfactant is to reduce the surface tension. So that's why they have given this, because when you see the alveolar surfactant, immediately you will write the surface tension. Okay. So alveolar surfactant will increase compliance of the lung. Okay, this is the answer. So question 5, what will happen if the lung lose their elasticity? This is the very easy question. Anyone will try? What will happen if the lungs lose their elasticity? Chest wall expand and become barrel shaped, lungs collapse, FRC decreases, vital capacity increases. If the lung lose their elasticity, what happens? This A is the answer. Chest wall expands and become barrel shaped. Okay. Answers are here. You can go through one more time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
So these are the very important topics. As I told you, go through once again, make your own notes of all the things which I told you. That is mechanics of breathing, that is mechanism of inspiration and expiration is a main question. It may be asked to you for 10 marks. Okay. Then tracheobronchial tree also may be asked to you for short note. Okay, tracheobronchial tree can be asked to you. Then pulmonary function tests can be asked to you as a main question, or each one like vital capacity or FEV1 can be asked to you for a short notes. Okay, those are very important. And compliance can be asked to you for 10 marks question. Okay, compliance of the lung. Okay, can be asked for 10 marks. Then the other short notes are V by P ratio, okay, diffusion capacity of the lung, dead space. Okay, these are the very important short notes which are asked in this topic which I have covered till now, that is 6.2 competency. Okay, next class I will be taking the gaseous exchange, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusion, okay, from the next class. So in these topics you go through the GK PAL first 4 chapters, okay, which I have covered till now. Go through, make your own notes. If you have any doubt, anytime you can ask me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.